On the best in black wrestling for 2023. Who has been the best? Who has been involved in the best stuff? We're going to get to it in just a second, so stay tuned. This is Wrestle Extra.
Oh, yo, this is Wrestle Extra. I'm your boy, A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate, always joined by my trios team, the Real House of Black, Mex, the WrestleManiac, if you will. Yeah. And of course, the omnipresent, the professor that is Gerard Bonner. As Mex said, today is the Wrestle Extra 2003 year review.
2003.
Sheesh! Wow.
2023. Oh my god.
Yeah, we went back 20 years. What in the world?
Yeah, the delay messed up my head. Wow, the 2023 year review. That's a delay. Jesus,
man.
Wow, we are here. Let's pick month by month. We decided to go month by month instead of like a top 10 or anything like that. Let's go month by month. Let's hit it off with January. Now, the start of the year was very, very promising in the world of black wrestling. We saw the biggest news at the start of this year was that of Mercedes Moné, the former Sasha Banks in WWE. Of course, she was out for a very long period of time after departing from WWE, very abruptly. Everyone knows the story, everyone knows the news. And for a very long time, we were speculating where she's going to end up, where she's going to turn up. And we finally got our answer at Wrestle Kingdom, in all places, when Mercedes Moné made her debut appearance at Wrestle Kingdom. Mex, just run me through exactly what happened with that, and what it made you feel then when you saw her make that appearance.
Well, yeah, I think if I'm correct, she had actually come to light by the end of 2022 that she was going to make an appearance at Wrestle Kingdom on the 4th of January earlier this year. And you always kind of just wonder, what is an appearance? What's going to happen on the show and stuff like that. And it came following the IWGP Women's title defense. Kyrie, at the time, who was the champion, had a successful defense on the Wrestle Kingdom show, and Mercedes Moné came out to much acclaim. Big pop from the Japanese crowd, who have not been making noise for a long time because of the pandemic. So this was like their first kind of audible pop. When these were allowed again at New Japan shows, and she came out. It was very clear. She came out in the segment of where the champion had just won. She was coming after that newly put together IWGP Women's title. She dropped Kyrie with her move. I forget what she calls it now. That new move, what was it?
I forgot the name of it.
Completely forgot.
I forgot, but there was a lot of.
It was definitely a different move.
Yes, it wasn't a bank statement, as we know, but there was a lot of chat about it didn't look well, or it wasn't done well. I remember that being a thing for a while afterwards. But yeah, someone that is, a key figure in black wrestling, a key figure in women's wrestling, and just an overall superstar, had reemerged at a place where we know that has always meant like something to her. She's always wanted to wrestle in Japan, and she now appeared on their biggest stage, sort of thing. So laid her mark going after the champion, and it was to see what happened from there, which I guess we'll touch on today as well.
As you said, Mex, she's a big star in black wrestling, big star in women's wrestling, and with Japan, we've been an appearance in Japan. Japanese wrestling hasn't been known necessarily for women's wrestling or even many black talents. Yes, we've had a few, the likes of Ricochet, a Bob Sapp back in the day, Leo Rush in his time, ACH. But that's only, a few names we can mention. Gerard, just how important was it to see a black female as important or make an appearance so important to Japanese wrestling in general?
I think it was massive. It was absolutely massive for a number of reasons. As you mentioned, it's a sight that we don't normally see in Japanese wrestling or in pro wrestling, period. And what I think it also spoke to was two things. One, it looked as though in that moment, New Japan had a strong commitment to women's wrestling and to making a foothold in the United States. Again, this is January. That narrative might have changed toward the end of the year, but at that point, that's what it meant. But the bigger thing that it meant was the global domination of the African American woman in pro wrestling. And that would really launch for the entire year this space of domination that we would see for Black women in 2023 across multiple promotions. It doesn't hit the same if Mercedes Moné does not debut Wrestle Kingdom on January the 4th. So it really, I mean, we already had Bianca in place, we had Jade in place, but this was one of those things that really catapulted things to where later in the year we'd be talking about the strength of the African American female in pro wrestling. I think that is the real significance of what Mercedes Moné did on January 4th.
Most definitely, and obviously during her time away from pro wrestling, obviously we saw her on catwalks, we saw her on red carpets, all that type of thing. You mentioned Bianca and Jade, both ladies as well, being in those types of spaces, and as you said, propelling the Black female in wrestling in a major way in 2023. The other thing that he did as well, very quite immediately, we talked about this quite a lot back in January as well, was the likes of Tricia Dora, Willow Nightingale, seeing those ladies and a few others in Japan themselves in smaller promotions and stuff, but quite significantly, quite a few of them in the early months of 2023 in Japan. But let's just talk about real quickly, like, what has happened to Mercedes since then. Has it been a good thing? Has it been a bad thing? And what does this landscape of the Black female and female wrestling in general in Japan, how has it changed, Gerard?
Well, as I'm sure we'll detail a little bit more, Mercedes obviously getting injured later in the year, I think really did have a strong impact on what we have seen in terms of the push for the prominence of women's wrestling in Japan. With her being injured in May in that particular matchup, where they were determining the strong open weight women's championship. From there, we had not seen much in the way of prominent features for women's wrestling in Japan. And this is so interesting because we know Stardom, coming into 2023, there was a lot of buzz about Stardom coming on the heels of what was the women's 150 at that particular point, and the many spots that Stardom wrestlers took in that top 10. So a lot of eyes were on Stardom's partnership with New Japan. This moment of Mercedes being there obviously meant we were going to get some great matches in Stardom as well. So we were anticipating a lot when the injury happened. And, not just the injury happened, but in April, she had lost the IWGP Women's Championship, which we'll obviously talk about that particular moment. Her injury had a much bigger impact than I think any of us expected. We didn't know how long she would be out, but it became clear that one of two things happened. Either New Japan's commitment to women's wrestling really diminished following her injury, or we stopped paying attention. And I think it might have been the former that caused the latter, right? Like there were no more high profile matches that were happening. There really wasn't even much of a presence, certainly in America. And so it all showed by the end of the year that this focus on women's wrestling from New Japan specifically was centered around Mercedes Moné. It wasn't necessarily centered around their love for women's wrestling. It was centered. You can now make the argument that maybe even in October of 2022, when this IWGP Women's Championship was created, it may have been created for her all along. And now that she's injured, it seems as though that commitment waned significantly.
We're going to get on to what happened after but we're sticking in January. Mexican tournament. Oh, am I disappeared? Oh, how important that was for Oku, and of course Brian Keith also made an appearance as well. How important was it for Michael Oku in January to be at the Battle of Los Angeles?
Yeah, it was massive. This was him coming off a really strong year in 2022. You know, PWG, I think more so of latter years, was like one of those kind of proving grounds within wrestling, within the indie scene. And I guess because we have so many indie shows now, so much access to wrestling, it doesn't quite hold that kind of I guess that kind of position anymore, as well as obviously the amount of stars that came through there have dispersed into top companies as well. But it's still one of those places that are beloved. Seeing Michael Oku from the UK over there, you know, going to war with the likes of Takeshita that we see, you know, on TV frequently at this point in AEW, being involved in a tag match against Jericho and the JAS and stuff like that. These are just like incredible things to add to your CV. And even from a place where, you know, he didn't progress in the tournament, he didn't win the tournament or anything like that, you know, following that PWG tournament that weekend, he was on the Chris Jericho's podcast, and Chris Jericho, you know, had kind of said, you know, don't worry that, you know, I think by then All In had been announced for August, and they said, don't worry, like I'll get you on the show, or, you know, if we're gonna do I remember him saying, if we're gonna do Dark or Elevation or something over there, you'll be there, sort of thing, don't worry, sort of thing. And I guess somewhat the promise was kept, because Oku was an extra on the All In show. He was on the pre-show, he was on the main show, so as part of the Anarchy in the Arena match I think they had. So you know, just rubbing shoulders with the right people, putting yourself out there, getting in the right circles. It was all about that exposure, and this wasn't his first kind of outing in the US, but it was a very important outing in the US with, you know, like I say, the names he was surrounded by, and even, you know, the likes of Excalibur. We know his involvement in PWG. So, you know, he's rubbing shoulders with the right people now. It's only a matter of time before, you know, he gets that ring, and, you know, he could be off anywhere in the world. So, yeah, a really good time. And it set up the rest of his year, where he later on became the undisputed British heavyweight champion.
That was a major thing as well, beating Will Ospreay. Finally, I think after maybe a second or third try, you know, he finally won that title that he's been chasing after for a very long time. We head into February, and we go back to Mercedes. Following her appearance at Wrestle Kingdom, it was announced that she would appear, I believe it was in Seattle, at Battle in the Valley,
San Jose,
and would take on Kairi. Or was it San Jose? Gerard, just tell me what exactly happened once that match was announced.
Yeah, not long after her appearance at Wrestle Kingdom, and I say not long, like same day, they announced that she would be appearing at Battle in the Valley, and tickets immediately sold out. Immediately, which again spoke to the drawing power of Mercedes Moné. It's one of the reasons why they signed her, and they absolutely got their money's worth. And her first match would be fighting Kairi for the IWGP Women's Championship. So you now have a sold out space, and her entrance alone felt big time. It's interesting because I think everybody obviously associated her with WWE, her with larger than life entrances. And so even her entrance at Wrestle Kingdom was befitting of Mercedes Moné. I think so many people ordered this pay-per-view. So many people were there in the house, and some may have never seen a New Japan show before. So they may not have been prepared for what they were going to see. Wherever Mercedes shows up, it's big time. And she turned that event into something big time. And by the time she was done, she had won the IWGP Women's Championship. Interestingly enough, this did not main event that show. There was a match after that. I believe it was a tag match that involved Okada and Tanahashi. And Okada was kind of doing his send-off. And then Mercedes comes out with the belt. And the two of them are kind of your go-home image there from New Japan, which spoke, again, very highly in terms of where they saw Mercedes Moné. And so the Mercedes effect showed up big time with obviously viewership and subscriptions to New Japan World going up immediately with her appearance. And then there in February, obviously pay-per-view buy rates went up, tickets sold out. It was all the things you expected from signing a major star, and she did exactly that.
Going from Mercedes to another major female star who we mentioned the name already as well, is Jade Cargill, who in February got to the milestone of 50-0 in AEW, still as the TBS Women's Champion. Mex, how important has it been, or was that run for Jade? Was it as important as we wanted it to be? Was it as major as we wanted it to be? Did that 50-0 feel the way it should have felt?
I think at the time, I think it looked very clear at the time that, you know, we needed to do something with Jade. She was picking up steam. People liked her. Within her ability, as she was new to wrestling, she wasn't quite ready for like a main event push or the women's world title or whatever the case was when it all began. So they created this intermediary, this mid-card title, gave it to Jade, and it was very effective in just showcasing her in a certain way stylistically. It's like you know, many of us compared it to Goldberg WCW run. He's racking up these wins. It's like, hello, why isn't he world champion? All right, let's give him the United States Championship just to keep him occupied, sort of thing, before undoubtedly we'd have to go there, sort of thing. Very similar sort of thing here. And it was effective at first. There was a lot of squash matches in it. There were some good stories told. One of my favorites was the Nyla Rose one, where Nyla Rose stole the belt. And I think stealing belts in wrestling is just one of these things that happen, whether you know you like it in your wrestling or not. But I found Nyla Rose very entertaining, and kind of seeing Jade sweat, but not sweat because she's Jade. Was kind of good and kind of interesting storytelling. So yeah, I think that's maybe the one misstep they took. They didn't give her enough stories within that, you know, what was it, 60 day or 60 match streak. They didn't give her enough stories. It became very kind of samey with just squash matches and stuff. They didn't give her enough main event talents either. There's nothing wrong with a couple main event talents dropping down and giving her some matches, because those that you can call main event or at least more experienced than Jade, they gave her best matches. So why wasn't that a constant thing? You see what I mean? So there were definitely missteps. It became very kind of tiresome. I think it became quite obvious that we were waiting for Statlander to come and be the successor. Even though, again, at the time we argued that, you know, Willow Nightingale was catching speed and that it could have easily been Willow. But, you know, I think it done lots for her. She took it outside the company. She was looking like the women's world champ. She was being referred to by casuals as the women's world champ because all they see is a belt, and they see a fantastic, you know, looking woman, built, looking like a, you know, a real pro wrestler. So they just call her the world champion anyway. So it done a lot for her. Obviously, we know it's kind of raised her stock, you know, tenfold compared to where she was when entering the company. In the end, WWE have benefited from it all. Our AEW did not benefit from it at all. Yeah, they didn't come to agreement in regards to contract. She decided to leave, knowing that there was something else on the horizon, and we're already kind of been clamoring for when is her debut gonna be for the last 3-4 months now already. Still not in sight, still not obvious when that's going to be, but that's because of the AEW have contributed to making this star. WWE are gonna slap her on a bigger platform now. So yeah, the run in itself, I think, served a purpose at times, became a bit insignificant at times, but the overall experience was very necessary.
For sure, for sure. As people, we always get to the start of a year and feel as though whatever happens at the start of the year, it sets the precedent for the rest of the year. We're already in February, and we've already seen how that is not always the case, that there's not a formula to this thing, and it doesn't necessarily mean everything. And I say that to say, like, not just with Mercedes, not just with Jade, even mentioning Michael Oku as well. We expected a little bit more than from his year. This year not happened the way we wanted it to necessarily. Still positive to take from it. But another person who had a very good outing at the very early stage of this year was Montez Ford at Elimination Chamber. He was one of the 6 guys featured in the match. When Montez came out, I think it was his first major singles opportunity as well. Obviously, whoever won was going to be the number 1 contender to the, I think, was it the Universe Championship still at the time?
Well, the one of those titles.
Yeah. We didn't have Seth Rollins.
We didn't have the right.
Yeah, we didn't have Seth Rollins' WWE Championship by then. Montez Ford came out just looking phenomenal in an outfit made by his wife Bianca Belair, of course.
It was. I'm sorry. It was a match for the U.S. title.
Oh, it's for the U.S. title.
It was for the United. I knew there was for the U.S. title.
Right. Oh, yes. Because was it Austin Theory who won in the end?
Yes, it was. Austin Theory.
That's correct. But he had a phenomenal outing, and as we said, he didn't win, but at the same time, it had our mouths watering for what could happen with Montez Ford in 2023. Gerard, just tell me a little bit about how it felt that night, but then what has happened for Montez since then?
Well, it's interesting, and I won't give too much away because this weekend was another reminder that you can be in a match, not walk away with a win, and still win, right? And so that's kind of how we felt with Montez Ford. I think it feels like it's been the last 2 or 3 years that there's been this rumor that keeps building about this breakup between the Street Profits. And so everybody felt Montez Ford was going to be the star. And as soon as we got close to it, we started seeing his partner just all of a sudden get so much better. And it was like, okay, we're going to stop this conversation. We're going to stop these rumors. Then we get to Elimination Chamber. Montez Ford comes out of the back looking like a literal $1 million. There's no Street Profits gear on him. He's got his own jacket made. He's got his own gear, his own colors. Like, you look at this guy and you're like, oh, yeah, Montez is the star. And so literally from this match, his entrance was amazing. His performance in the match was amazing. We went, okay, if you don't put the U.S. title on him today, it's okay. We see where it's going. He's going to be a star. And, well, fast forward to the end of the year, and he's part of a team with no name. It's amazing how these things happen. He went from being the star of the show to floundering in anonymity. That's where Montez Ford is right now. And so it is crazy to see what can happen throughout an entire year. Spoiler alert, the Street Profits never broke up. Spoiler alert, there was never a singles push for Montez Ford. Spoiler alert, We don't even know what to say about Montez right now, because right now he looks like a pastor's armor bearer. That's where he is right now. It's pretty crazy to think that the same guy who was inside the Elimination Chamber in Montreal is an armor bearer these days, while his pastor is actually currently in a #1 contenders tournament for that same U.S. title.
Yep.
Funny how these things happen. Welcome to the year that's 2023 and the career of Montez Ford.
Wow. And not to make this year review sound like so negative, but we move to March and we see Powerhouse Hobbs.
We forgot one more thing in February, though.
Oh, go for it.
And that is the long-awaited rematch between Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar at the same card.
Very true.
The match that, sent me on a whole prayer vigil, believing that at some point Bobby Lashley and Brock Lesnar would show up at WrestleMania together.
Right.
And I held on to the final hour, and it wasn't to be. Apparently, this war ended at the Elimination Chamber via disqualification.
Make it make sense.
Make it make sense. All of that in February, yeah.
All of that in February. We move to March and we see Powerhouse Hobbs, kind of quite surprisingly, win the TNT championship over Wardlow in a last man standing match. QT Marshall made a comeback to help out Powerhouse Hobbs. It wasn't the greatest of runs. It wasn't the shortest of runs. It again gave us this mouth-watering feeling of, okay, what's going to happen with Hobbs now? We kind of reverted. He did this whole thing with QT TV and had a few stooges behind him and whatnot, and it didn't quite work out the way we wanted it to. We see now Powerhouse Hobbs is with Don Callis in the Don Callis family. Again, I'm not going to have any of you kind of talk on it because I want to move on, because it's just like, what more is there to say? Like, we're here, but we're not anymore. And it's just like, all right, what actually happens? Like, the start of the year doesn't mean the end of the year, basically. But this is where we're at. Moving into April, of course, is the month where we see WrestleMania. Gerard, you just touched on it. This whole thing with Bobby Lashley. Let's talk about that. Bobby Lashley ended up having no match at WrestleMania. The man who the year before successfully defended the WWE Championship against Drew McIntyre. And, we had these 2 matches with Brock Lesnar. We got the third, but we were hoping the third would be at Mania. It didn't happen at Mania. Instead, Brock Lesnar ended up fighting Omos.
Oh, my.
Yeah. I think for me, the highlight of April wasn't WrestleMania. It wasn't what was happening with Bobby. It wasn't what was happening with Omos. It was more so what was happening with Gerard Bonner on WrstlXtra and his rants and hopes of Bobby Lashley somehow intervening and ending up in that match either with Omos and Brock or just Brock alone. Gerard, how do you feel on this day, knowing that none of that happened and all of those rants for about 6 weeks kind of almost came to nothing?
Well, they say faith without works is dead. I had my work. I did the things, But here's what I didn't know, that there were other forces at play behind the scenes that kind of helped explain why it didn't work. It still doesn't make sense to me. I mean, Bobby Lashley ends up winning, of course, the WrestleMania Battle Royal that happened on WrestleMania SmackDown. Wonderful. And he did at least get to make an appearance, as he showed up and waved like a pageant king or queen, to say, here I am. I'm the WrestleMania Battle Royal winner. That is me.
Right.
Yeah. So I was unhappy that it didn't come to play. It should have been better. Bobby deserved better.
Yeah, for sure. It was a question that so many people were asking as to why not make something happen for him during those 2 nights not just one night anymore, 2 nights of WrestleMania, and you still couldn't find a spot for Bobby Lashley, but we found a spot for the then emerging LA Knight. So that was interesting indeed. But of course, the massive positive that we take from WrestleMania was Bianca Belair defending her. It was the Raw Women's Championship.
Raw Women's Championship. Yep.
Raw Women's Championship. And has etched herself in history as with 3-0 at WrestleMania, all with titles involved, whether she's won them, whether she's defended, all with titles involved. Her first 3 WrestleManias, 3 wins in a row. Mex, how important is that? And of course, we know that later on she would then become, the longest reigning women's champion of the modern era in WWE. How important has it been that first half of 2023 for Bianca Belair?
Yeah, very important. I think we've seen with this kind of new regime in WWE as well, they seem to be making a point by erasing previous records, setting new ones, setting new milestones and things of that nature. So for her to be a part of it, for her to be a part of something so rich as the women's title, and something that's with every kind of day passing, it becomes more and more prestigious. The women's titles and the women's division and things like that. And for someone in Triple H to kind of give her this accolade, someone that we would argue that he didn't give her anything in NXT, as great as her character was, and as high as they were with her on NXT, she didn't ever achieve any of these kind of things in NXT. It clicked with the main audience, with the main roster audience and stuff like that. So it's good that they can recognize it and award her. And I know I've sat here for months, years on end saying that, I want to change, I want different, but she just works for WWE. She just works exactly how she is. We can see with the kind of outings they give her, the ambassadorial kind of duties they give her and things of that nature. Like she's a gem for the company, and long may it continue. Whilst we're talking about her, just a quick divulging from what we're doing. With Charlotte Flair injured now for 9 months, I was sure this is Charlotte Flair versus Bianca this year.
Right.
Where do you guys see Bianca going for WrestleMania now? Who is a competitor? Is it a singles match, or are they going to just dump her in something maybe akin to Bobby Lashley and this women's battle royal? God forbid.
It's a very difficult question to answer. That's the thing as well. It did feel as though it would have been Charlotte Flair. Obviously, there's still Io Sky. Who knows where that's going to go? There still could be a few places that goes, whether it be Bayley eventually, or someone else who comes around. It could still possibly be Bianca. It's not going to feel the same as if it was Charlotte Flair. Maybe a Becky Lynch in some way, but I can't think of anyone else. Nia Jax might be the only other person I can see kind of creating some kind of compelling story or difficulty for Bianca Belair. Because I'm just thinking a highlight of Bianca Belair hoisting Nia Jax over her shoulders.
Yeah, you're right to think that.
That alone is a WrestleMania moment. So there's still possibilities, but the obvious answer definitely isn't there at the moment. Definitely not for me. No.
Go on, Gerard.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, like, this is you mentioned Bobby Lashley, and I was like, surely not. But then when you start thinking about the challenges that they had to find somebody for Lashley, at one point it was Bray Wyatt, God rest his soul. And Bray getting sick is one of the reasons that, Bobby ended up not having a match on the card. So, now here's what's interesting. There's still enough time for them to create something for her. There are a lot of women right now in WWE. I don't know that they need to go into the NXT pipeline to grab somebody, but I do think there are enough people right now in WWE where a story could be told. The question is which story. And part of the challenge we have now is Bianca is top tier. So, you mentioned the Nia piece, and I think it was just for the moment. It's the same thing that gave us Brock and Omos. It was for the moment. It was for the visual to see, could Brock get Omos up for, you know, the F5. So it could be a space like that, considering we're getting Becky and Nia in 2 weeks, you know, on Raw. So that story won't need to be told at WrestleMania. I don't know. I think this is going to be interesting. And then there's the free agent market, like a Deonna Purrazzo, you know, and a few other names that are out there that, you know, Camille is out there. There are names that could show up that would be a very fun challenge for Bianca at WrestleMania.
There could be the possibility of a returning Sasha Banks. I don't want them to rush a Jade Cargill, but she's on the books.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, it was either the spectacle of her versus Nia Jax. You find a hokey way to get Nia Jax over to SmackDown and do something like that, or they meet in the Rumble or something and go from there, or Tiffany Stratton,
That's a possibility.
I think is more than ready for main at this point. So yeah, but yeah, interesting.
Very, 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 very interesting indeed. Sticking with April, obviously we saw Carmelo Hayes as well become the NXT champion, defeating Bron Breakker for the championship. Gerard, just tell me just how important was that for him? Because then obviously we saw him as a former North American champion. I think it was a 2-time North American champion. Yes. And as a cruiserweight champion, obviously he then, you know, unified those 2 belts there. We were waiting forever and a day for this match to come around. We knew what the outcome was going to be, but did it still feel as massive to you when he finally hoisted that NXT championship above his head and could call himself the NXT champion?
It totally did. It totally did. You know, it kind of reminds me of when Big E had announced that he was going to cash in that night on Raw. You know, like, we hated the idea of you announcing it, but then the question is, A, would he really cash in? And B, would he win? Like, you know, usually when people announce that they're going to cash in, they don't win. So to see it actually happen, I think in this case where history was made, the youngest main event during WrestleMania weekend, we knew that it had to come down to these two, Braun and Carmelo. It had to come down to these two, and Carmelo had to win. Like, it just had to happen. Though you couldn't really guarantee it because, you know, anything could happen, and you know, people came into that weekend swearing one person was going to win and somebody else did. So to see it actually happen, and then to see them, you know, really take advantage of being in LA, using the Lakers colors, like all of those kinds of things in that space, the home of the Lakers as well. I thought it was great. And probably the bigger question isn't so much how big that moment felt, but would the title run actually live up to our perceived expectations, which we'll obviously get into.
So let me ask the question, Mex, do you think that run lived up to the expectations that we had for Carmelo Hayes as the NXT champion?
His run as champion?
Yep.
I wouldn't feel so. Even when I was thinking about today's episode, I was thinking, wow, he really didn't have that title for all that long when it comes to, you know, comparing it to some other kind of NXT title reigns. But at that point, he was already a champion. Like, he is the golden star, the star boy of NXT. Like, he's literally the cornerstone of that company, of that, you know, developmental brand right now. Like, he's just doing so well. They give him all the good spots. We've seen him on main roster, you know, flirting with all the Bobby stuff, whatever that stuff is. And then, you know, we saw him this past week in this United States tournament to crown the #1 contender, where he got through against Waller. Now he's got a match with Kevin Owens this week. Like, he's given all the spots. And even with his, it was funny, even with his little interaction backstage with Kevin Owens, I thought this is like how Kevin Owens kind of came through, sort of thing.
Totally.
Although Kevin Owens was very abrupt and brash with how he made it to the main roster. It's like you see someone, and obviously then with Kevin Owens, there was a lot of Stone Cold kind of comparisons. But yeah, he's I think the championship run in hindsight now was just more like let's give him the accolade because he deserves it, but we don't need to kind of give him this to force him to excel. You know, sometimes you give someone the championship to like try to bring the best out of them, like push them to another level. This was just more like he needed it because of what he's achieved, and you know, the North American runs, the cruiserweight runs and everything, the epic story being told now with Trick. Like, you don't need to be champion to do this kind of stuff. And the fact he's been champion, Trick is kind of rising to that occasion now. And it's like, obviously the little seeds of jealousy and stuff are being planted. Like, this is what it's about, man. He's going to graduate from this class of NXT within the next 6 months. He won't be here. I don't see it at all. Yeah, Bron Breakker and him. Bron is all like the typical kind of WWE looking guy, and you know, with everything, he ticks all those boxes. But Carmelo almost ticks the boxes of the new school wrestler, and you know, he's excelling in that way. And it's been great. If I could just put in here, I remember we wanted to go to NXT when we were out in LA, Stand and Deliver, but I think it was the same day as WrestleMania Night 1, wasn't it? It was earlier in the morning, like 9 o'clock in the morning or something. So we were literally had NXT on in the house, and Carmelo's match was just before we were going to leave because we were leaving early to go shoot content around the stadium. But no one wanted to leave. Our taxi was outside, and we just kept it 5 minutes to watch it. We had to watch Carmelo lift this. And even when you said it, like, we knew it was going to happen, but we had to watch him lift this title, lift this belt above his head. And it was literally like screaming and yelling, like, yeah, he done it. Lock the door quick. Like, everyone, running back to see if anything happened right at the end of the broadcast, because if you watch NXT, things happen at the end of the broadcast. So it's like, it was just so, you knew it was coming. And for some of us that have been watching, you know, Christian Casanova from way back when, like, it's kind of like an anointing. Like, he's finally got there. So yeah, big up him. He's had a great year.
Yeah, man, it's been a good year for Carmelo, definitely. His run was 198 days as the NXT champion. He beat Grayson Waller, Bron Breakker again, Noam Dar, Baron Corbin. Crazy match with Ilya Dragunov, and of course a massive match with Wesley as well. We'll get into that later on. You know, it's been a great run. And as someone said as well, like, he does not have to be champion to be the center of attention. As a North American champion in 2022, he was the main guy. And I wouldn't expect anyone to really argue that, apart from Bron Breakker, who was the NXT champion at the time. I think anyone watching would have seen that, you know, all eyes and all focus was on Carmelo, and I believe it's still there. You know, we've seen a few other people rise, like the likes of Dragunov, and a few others, and even Trick himself, kind of, you know, getting that nice push and stuff like that. But it's clear to see that there are still major, massive plans for Carmelo. We move now into May, and I believe this is now when the president for 2023 starts being set. We saw that, you know, we talked about Mercedes Moné and the speculation with her and where she's going to sign, where she's going to end up. And there was still speculation with Trinity as well, formerly Naomi in WWE, but not as much. But then she made this move that made everyone stand up. And we're like, okay, I get it now. And I believe around that time, you know, we didn't know what she was going to do. She was talking about leaving wrestling altogether, but instead she signs and debuts with Impact. Gerard, how massive was that moment?
You could make the argument, and it would be a viable argument, that this was the biggest moment in women's wrestling in 2023. And the reason why I say that is, first of all, I think there were all the rumors about where Mercedes would end up. And so, as Kevin Kelly so expertly said at Wrestle Kingdom, it was the worst kept secret in pro wrestling. I mean, it just was. But when it came to Trinity, like the news leaked one day, and then the next day it was official. I mean, and it was shocking because I think in people's mind, they saw WWE, AEW, and obviously the new path to New Japan. Nobody considered Impact as a viable option for Trinity. But then when you started thinking about it, it made the most sense for what Trinity wanted to accomplish. She wanted to prove that she could still very much be the wrestler that we wanted her to be and never got the opportunity to see. She also was able to do other things with the schedule of Impact, where she's not on the road every week. She tapes once or twice a month, which allows her to pursue her modeling career and the other things that she might want to do. And it gives her a chance to be the one. Everybody, the whole point of Mercedes and Trinity leaving WWE was they wanted to be acknowledged as the one. And it couldn't happen in the scenario they were in. They had to go to two separate places. And so going back to what we said at the top of the show, where Mercedes began to set this precedent for the rise and domination of African-American women all throughout pro wrestling, for this to happen, she had to go to Impact. And unlike the signing of Mercedes, Impact was already dedicated to women's wrestling. I think a lot of people had questions in terms of what this would mean for both Impact and for Trinity. And let's just say that by the end of the year, both Impact and Trinity absolutely won because of this signing. This signing was the tipping point, I think, for Impact for the entire year. Biggest signing in their company's history. They will tell you, I will tell you, all the numbers follow it. And the following that Trinity brought continued to help elevate Impact to where they are. So I think this was a massive move for pro wrestling and proved that she could totally exist outside of WWE.
As you said, the numbers have been talking and kind of, made it all factual at the end of the day. Her debut appearance was the most viewed video on Impact's YouTube channel this year. It continues whenever she's on the show, that they get the most viewers, or the clips that they put on YouTube get the most views, and it's helped Impact push themselves as well in general, not just with Trinity. It's nice that as much as the numbers don't lie, that their focus isn't her.
Right.
Whereas others have made that mistake to where someone's the star and then they only focus on that person and then everyone else kind of loses out. Everyone's winning right now. And they're even going back to, going from Impact to TNA. And I think that just makes a statement in the kind of confidence that they have as a company. They had Will Ospreay. They're talking about trying to sign Okada. Like, what? Impact signing Okada? What? When you've got WWE and AEW? What?
And Impact actually having Okada and Ospreay on the same show in January. Like, what?
Yeah,
they're signing people like crazy. They've got this new streaming deal with Endeavor, that, well, we'll talk about Endeavor later. Yeah, there's a whole thing happening right now with Impact, and I really think it got started with this move to sign Trinity.
It definitely plays a massive, massive part, and I don't think that's talked about enough.
Right.
I don't think that's talked about enough. I don't think that's acknowledged enough. But at the same time, we can see it, we can acknowledge it. And to also say this as well, before Trinity signed with Impact, the biggest female star that they had was Deonna Purrazzo. She defeated Deonna Purrazzo for the Knockout Championship and has gone on to beat her 2 more times. She's 3-0 against their biggest star of the last, 2 or 3 years. It's crazy. Her year has been amazing. And obviously we've said it on the show already a few times that her year was definitely, in comparison, being bigger than Mercedes, to where we did not think that was going to be the case. We were saying the complete opposite at the start of the year and towards the end of 2022 as well. So it's phenomenal to see what she's been doing there. We've kind of mentioned this already, so I won't say too much about this. But, you know, after Bianca won at WrestleMania, she's then gone on to be the longest reigning women's champion. And that was cemented in May when she beat Io Sky at Backlash, was it?
Yes.
In Puerto Rico, and became, you know, the longest reigning women's champion of the modern era in WWE. The other thing that happened, it's a milestone, yet a setback, but she's gone on to better things. Was Jade Cargill reaching 60-0, but then finally being defeated for a TBS championship, being beaten by Chris Statlander in crazy fashion, because she defeated Taya Valkyrie that night, and then was challenged by Chris Statlander literally minutes later and lost the title. We never saw her in AEW for I think it was about 2 months. She made an appearance, lost again, and it was very clear from that second loss to Statlander that she was on her way out. Or the rambling started, and, you know, she eventually signed to WWE. We'll get to that in a second. Let's move to June. And, you know, we talked about Trinity winning the Knockouts championship, but also as well on that same night at Slammiversary, it was very interesting to see Kenny King become the digital media champion. Kenny King sadly not with Impact anymore. Recently, you know, announced that he's leaving. But then also as well a massive win, which was probably overshadowed by Trinity a little bit, is Lio Rush defeating Chris Sabin in a matter of minutes to become the Impact X Division champion. Mex, Lio Rush is now not with Impact again. This whole thing is a bit weird, but when that happened, when you heard that news that Lio Rush defeated Chris Sabin, and in the fashion that he did, what did it make you think?
I mean, at that point, Lio Rush he'd been having a terrific year. He was here, there, and everywhere. He was over in Japan and everything. Like, so, although yes, it happened in surprising fashion, it caught me off guard. Especially for someone that I don't watch Impact week to week. I kind of just tune in for the pay-per-views and stuff. I was just like, yo, what's happened here? Sort of thing. But you can believe it because of the year the guy's having. And, you know, if they really think this is an effective way to put somebody over and to give him that coveted X Division title, which means, you know, absolutely everything to Impact. Like that's pretty much what the whole brand stands for when it comes to that X Division. So yeah, it's, you know, Chris Sabin has nothing to like be embarrassed of. He is who he is and accomplished so much in wrestling, means so much to that company as well. So yeah, it was surprising, but at the same time, Leo was on a tear those times, so it kind of made sense.
For sure. Moving into July, sorry. We've talked about long title runs. We talked about Jade's record setting. You know, we're talking about Bianca, Carmelo doing his thing as well. But two other people who also broke records in terms of long title reigns. Athena as the Ring of Honor Women's Champion, and Wesley as the North American NXT North American Champion. Gerald, just give me a quick synopsis of Wesley's run, and then also, you know, the importance of Athena's 2023.
Absolutely. Wesley, what a run he had. He won the North American Championship back at Halloween Havoc 2022, back in October, and held on to that title for 269 days. And you talked about sometimes wrestlers make titles and titles make wrestlers. I think this was a case where the North American Championship gained even greater prominence. And as that happened, the stock of Wesley rose exponentially as the North American champion. You know, you're talking about a guy who in 2022 lost the tag team titles by never being in the ring because something happened with his partner, gets stripped of the title following, you know, WrestleMania weekend, and he's literally trying to find his way. He finds his way, wins that title, and really, you know, helps weather the storm as NXT transitions from 2.0 back to kind of a black and gold-esque kind of place. He was really that kind of constant in that. And so it was amazing to watch his incredible run. The previous longest reign was held by, of all people, Keith Lee at 181 days. And so it's amazing to think about that. Of all of the guys who held that title, you know, his reign was bested. He bested Keith Lee, of all people. So an incredible and an amazing reign there for Wes Lee. And was I supposed to talk about Athena too?
Yes, go for it.
Okay. So Athena, July is significant for Athena for a few reasons. Number one, she becomes the longest reigning Ring of Honor Women's World Champion. But on top of that, that month, she also becomes the first woman, along with Willow Nightingale, to main event a Ring of Honor pay-per-view, as they main evented Death Before Dishonor with that women's championship. You know, when you start talking about significant years in pro wrestling, Athena had one of the most significant years of any promotion, as she literally put Ring of Honor on her back for this entire year, a year that, you know, we finally got to see Ring of Honor somewhat on TV. But it ended up being the year where she dominated, and her title became more important than the world title, became more important than the TV title. Her presence really cemented Ring of Honor. And so, yeah, July ended up being incredibly important, as her and Willow would end up main eventing Death Before Dishonor. And it would be a precursor, because it wouldn't be her last main event of a Ring of Honor pay-per-view in this year. So congratulations to both Wes Lee and Athena, again, showcasing the power of the Black champion. And again, we keep talking about this theme throughout the year of Black women dominating brands. Here is the third separate brand, or technically the fourth separate brand we've talked about today, where a Black woman ends up dominating. We had Bianca, we had Mercedes, you know, we had Trinity. Technically, you had Jade, that's 4, and then Athena, 5, already by the first half of the year. Pretty impressive.
Phenomenal indeed. To throw a little bit of a negative, it was supposed to be history making, it was supposed to be amazing, it was supposed to be positive, but it didn't quite work out the way anybody wanted it to. And that was the in-ring debut of the gold medalist, Gable Steveson. I definitely want Mex to talk about this one, because I'm about to be entertained as to how Mex felt when how did this whole thing happen. So Gable Steveson ends up in a match with Baron Corbin. That was his debut match on NXT. It was a pay-per-view. I can't remember which one it was.
Great American Bash.
Great American Bash, of all things, the great
of
American
all things,
Bash.
Right?
Mex, just tell us what happened during that match and the reaction and everything that's happened since that in-ring debut of this very, very much anticipated in-ring debut of Gable Steveson.
Truth be told, I can't tell you much of what happened because I've erased it from my memory. However, I can tell you how I felt. Massively underwhelmed, totally missold. You know, you've overpromised and underdelivered. I think with Gable Steveson, you know, when they first pulled the whole he's a member of Raw and all of that kind of stuff, which was the best part of nearly 2.5-3 years ago now. You thought, okay, Olympic gold medalist, announced that he's part of your TV show, smart, cool, you know, the casuals might tune in or whatever. Then he just doesn't turn up. All right. Then we hear rumors that, you know, wherever he is still studying, still on campus, WWE have organized for him to have his own ring on campus so he can be practicing. He's already got the ear and the eye of people like the Lesners, the Angles, the Paul Heymans of the business, who are probably doing their damnedest to try and cultivate the talent and everything within this guy and bring him to the forefront. I'm sure between those guys, WWE, they probably had some challenges with some of the things mentioned within Gable's background in his past and things of that nature, that probably didn't help, and probably didn't help the fans as well. You know, some fans are very kind of high and mighty, no matter what the issue may be. I think some that you can kind of, you know, stay on your high horse for, but you know, some people act like you know, some people can never make a mistake or whatever the case may be. I don't want to get into it, but it's like they just didn't give him a chance. They wanted results from day one. So I think that's why WWE pretty much took their time with him and tried to make him as good as possible. I think they didn't help themselves by putting his brother out on TV before him, which Damon got it, he gets it, sort of thing. And then it's like, yeah, now comes the brother in Gable, the star, and like I said, underwhelming, underdelivered, you know, completely just told us he was going to be one thing, didn't deliver at all. His little running standing moonsault is probably the best thing I've seen out of him. And yeah, he's pretty much been vanquished from the product ever since. And I don't, maybe, you know, you guys can remind me, I don't think I've seen anything official that he's, you know, gone or anything like that, but it's clearly a situation with him. It's like back to the drawing, or we will pretty much just quietly release him. So yeah, terribly underwhelming.
I believe, you know, you mentioned quite a few things in that, where, you know, you said his history kind of caught up with him, especially in terms of the reaction from the fans. Pressure has definitely had a lot to do with it. Then, as you said, you know, his brother, who we know as Damon Kemp, has been doing his thing and doing it very well. You know, he's not a standout guy, but at the same time, we don't necessarily look at him and think, yeah, he needs help, but he definitely has the potential to be, you know, to do great things. And you know, a lot of what happened in that match was the reaction of the fans. That was the thing that everyone remembers, kind of thing. And I think for me, it's just a case of, you know, I think he may have tried too hard. The pressure got to him, but at the same time, you know, this whole thing of this past 2 or 3 years where he's been training, been doing whatever, I've questioned this myself. Does he actually have the real passion for this? Is this kind of, right, I'm a wrestler in, you know, I'm an amateur wrestler. I'm very good at it, of course. I'm a gold medalist. I'm a, you know, 2-time state champion and national champion and all the rest of it. And I'm going to just go into pro wrestling. This is going to be easy for me. I feel as though it's been a lot harder than he expected. And he's like, oh, I don't know if I want to try this hard. This should just come naturally to me. It hasn't, and I don't really want to put the amount of effort that I'm supposed to put into this thing. For me, I think it's a mentality issue. Definitely way more than a capability issue. I think it was quite obvious that he's capable, but the mentality just isn't there. And then on top of that, you got the reaction of the fans. That clearly isn't going to help anyone.
Or it could be like you're saying, maybe WWE have spotted him and approached him and been like, "We think you should do this," sort of thing. And yeah, he thought, well, you know, it's guaranteed good money, this, that, and the other. It's not quite the real thing, so I might be protected, like in terms of my body and physically and stuff like that. And yeah, like you're saying, he just hasn't clicked. So either way, there could be a passion side on it, like he doesn't want to work harder for it, or this was never his plan. He just thought this is a plan. But either way, he's still struggling. Yeah, it's an opportunity, but he's just struggling.
Yeah, it's an opportunity. It's come along, and I'm like, okay, cool. And you've got to think as well during this time since he was announced as a Raw superstar 2 years ago, he's still opted and have built this ring at the campus and all the rest of it. He's still opted to continue to do amateur wrestling during that time. I mean, you know, it for me that doesn't make sense. For me, that doesn't make sense. It's very similar, akin to, say, Anthony Ogogo, who was also an Olympic boxer, won a silver medal in Olympic boxing, and imagine, you know, a Don King of the boxing world today coming up to him and saying, right, I'm going to offer you $1 million, this to be a professional. Oh, no, I'm going to do another Olympics, mate.
Yeah.
Really? I think it's that. So I think for me, it's a mentality issue. Just the headspace where he's at and all the rest of it. I want it to work out. I have big hopes and I want to see kind of where it can go and all the rest of it. But a lot has to change in order for it to pan out the way that both parties, both WWE and Stevenson, want it to go. But let's move on because we talked about that way more than I expected to. We move into August, and we've spoken about Carmelo Hayes and Wesley. But the two of them ended up, having a match for Hayes' NXT Championship. The reason why this is being mentioned today is because it was history making in the sense where it was the first time two black men have faced each other for the NXT Championship. It was the main event on the weekly show, which was phenomenal within itself. Joe, just talk me through, how that was, how it made you feel. The anticipation for that match was so hard. I just remember kind of posting about it, hearing about it. We've got Wesley off being talked about as the greatest North American champion that there's been. Carmelo Hayes is running wild as the NXT champion. How heavy was that anticipation for that match?
It was wildly significant. And what's so fun about this is it was significant because these were two incredible wrestlers who helped to define NXT for the last couple of years. It wasn't that they were two black wrestlers. It was that they were two great wrestlers who just happened to be black. And so I think it hit probably some of us later than when it was initially announced, because, this is kind of a dream match of sorts. These two going at it for all that they've done and all that we expected. NXT realized it. And so NXT said, we're going to do this right. So they had Alicia Taylor, who, of course, has been the ring announcer for the last 4 years there, but they had her as the ring announcer. They had Booker T on commentary. And then they were bold enough to actually mention the moment on television. That is wildly significant because, again, a lot of times companies shy away from that and they leave it up to us to be the ones to remind them of that. But, they were very upfront about this, which I thought was so significant. So we all got to bask in this moment, not necessarily on pay-per-view, but on weekly television. What a huge statement. What a moment, a very, very proud moment for all of us to be able to enjoy.
It was phenomenal. Another thing that happened in August that kind of set it was part of like the early cogs in the wheel of what we were about to see for this guy for the latter end of 2023. We saw Swerve Strickland, compete at All In London, said to be the biggest wrestling show of all time. There's an argument still, but it is, as the records show. But Swerve was there on the card. There was a bit of a kerfuffle in terms of who his partner was going to be and all this kind of stuff. AR Fox probably couldn't get his permission sorted to leave the country or whatever it was, and all this other stuff. But Swerve was there. Mex, just tell me how big that was for Swerve and how important it's been for him in 2023 and obviously, moving into the latter stage of 2023.
Yeah, there's been a lot of kind of start and stop for Swerve since he came into the company, like February, March last year. And then just as you said, kind of middle of this year, he started hitting his groove. The Mogul Embassy had kind of formed, and AR Fox was his right-hand man by that point. And like you said, there was a bit of a mishap there. AR Fox should be right at his side right now with everything that's going on and gaining from that. But, whatever happened there happened. But he found himself, on AEW's biggest show, outside of the country, the biggest international show, teaming with a legend in Christian, who's on his own great TNT title run, going up against another kind of star prospect in Darby Allin and a legend in Sting. This will be one of Sting's last matches. When you're looking at Sting's, final days in wrestling, that is, like, his Swerve's name will be there, like with one of the biggest matches. So coffin match, and even just how that match finished, well, it was just a really, really fun match. It's fun to see it live and stuff. And then from there, the interruption of Hangman's promo, the initial match of Hangman's promo, the initial match at Wrestle Dream, sorry, the highly acclaimed death match that later followed. Like, we've seen someone that for years on end has said potential, like, Swerve's gonna be that guy and everything, and now we are seeing, that guy has arrived, sort of thing. And in the last few months, we've spoken endlessly about when it should happen. When will he land the big one, the AEW World Title? Will he be the first Black AEW champion? I think he has to be at this point. Like, I'll be shocked if any other Black person in AEW beats him to that title. So yeah, the everything is aligning. He's taking all the correct steps. He's doing all the right things. Character work is on point. In-ring work has always been on point. So it's just kind of, waiting for your time now. It's almost like the egg time has been turned over. We're kind of counting down every grain of sand until that moment comes at this point.
It's phenomenal just the way his year has gone, and we will get back to Swerve at some point as well. Moving to September, the biggest news in wrestling throughout this whole year was the merger of WWE with TKO, also with UFC. WWE, UFC, Endeavor creating TKO. The significance of this was also the fact that we saw Montez Ford and Bianca Belair, standing shoulder to shoulder with all of the higher ups of all of those companies. Vince, Triple H, Dana White of UFC, and all the guys from Endeavor as well. The two people that compete within those two brands, whether it be wrestling, MMA, the only two people was Bianca Belair and Montez Ford. Gerard, just how significant was that for them? We've already kind of spoken in length of how Montez Ford's year hasn't quite gone the way we expected it to when we were at the start of this year. Bianca at the time was also out of the ring as well, taking a bit of a break for a few months. But still, with their imminent documentary coming as well, very, very, very soon. I believe it's February it starts.
Yes.
How significant just is that moment for them? And what do you feel you have any kind of real expectation as to what can happen for them next year?
In terms of the significance, wildly significant. There are not very many moments where WWE ends up at the New York Stock Exchange. I think of a moment, 20 years ago or so, where they had announced that they were finally going public, and WWE is massive then. And so they would do things like hold, wrestling matches out there and, but still only a handful of people had that privilege to be there. And they were the names. I mean, you were talking, Triple H, you're talking Austin, you're talking Rock. And so to consider that it was Bianca and Montez who get the call, not Roman Reigns, your world champion, Seth Rollins, your world champion, not any of these other figureheads that you might consider to be that person. Instead, it's these two, not Charlotte, not Becky. Like, run through the roster of everybody you deem to be popular, not Cody, right? Everybody you deem to be popular, merch sellers, all the things. It is Bianca and Montez, who obviously are massive figures in their own right. It speaks to where the company is going. It speaks to how they view them inside the company. And again, it speaks to mainstream appeal at this particular point. So congratulations to them. What a historic moment.
Following that merger, we saw possibly the most talked about signing in wrestling in 2023, that being that of Jade Cargill. Moving from AEW. Obviously, we've talked in length about Jade Cargill's first half of the year. Mex, just how major was this signing? How much of a statement was it for WWE, for Jade, and even for TKO themselves? And how have they handled this thing since the signing was announced?
Yeah, absolutely massive. Like I don't even think you can really put into words like how this kind of even snowballed and started something this year in regards to her being, I guess, we spoke about Trinity finally signing and Mercedes turning up in New Japan, but between the juggernauts that are WWE and AEW, this is the first big kind of chess play of the year, and it's AEW losing someone that was homegrown, they had cultivated somewhat. If you ask Triple H, he might have a different answer, but someone that they had invested some amount of time into, and was clearly a mainstream star in the making. As fans would say, they almost basically let walk out the front door sort of thing and walk straight through WWE's front door, a door she had been in, a matter of years ago, and things didn't work out there yet. They had welcomed her back. They had sorted out a deal. She's very much keeping her everything in terms of she is Jade Cargill. She isn't anybody else. And this, like you said, this is like the first deal of this kind under this new umbrella. I was speculating at the time, is this the kind of presentation they're going to give everyone? Because the rollout was fantastic. It really felt like like you get those like massive like basketball trades between two teams or two football teams, a big transfer signing. Like it really felt like sports, like I was watching a real legitimate sport take place, and a massive signing had happened. And since then, she's clearly just been tucked away, working, improving. They're getting everything in place so that the debut and subsequent run makes sense, which is totally the right thing to do. This audience are, the audience is a lot smarter now than I guess of yesteryear, but ultimately there is so much that the WWE can offer right now in terms of women's wrestling and the competitors and the amount of competitors they have. And I think it was just last week we spoke about the merry-go-round they've got in NXT and bringing new ladies through all the time right now. They don't need to rush Jade at all. So yeah, they're just doing everything right now. And like I said, it was the catalyst of what began a snowball of big signings between then and the rest of this year.
The other thing that happened in September was also kind of like a statement in a sense of where WWE are trying to go, how important the merger with TKO has been, and just how much noise they want to make. And that was the surprise appearance of The Rock on an episode of SmackDown. It kind of happened, consequentially, I guess, with The Rock being, just a few miles away during a college football match. He was there, was doing punditry and stuff like that, and ended up on the show. That appearance broke YouTube records on WWE up until CM Punk turned up. Anyway, so another thing, we've been waiting for The Rock to make an appearance in some way. We expected him and hoped for him to make a WrestleMania appearance in Hollywood, of all places, of course, to face Roman Reigns. We haven't seen that. But what's been very interesting as well from the earlier in that day, when The Rock was talking, he was asked by Pat McAfee, just about that whole incident with, why didn't he turn up at WrestleMania? Why didn't it work out? And he said it was there, but they just couldn't fit the little fine details together in order for it to make more sense and all that kind of thing. It wasn't a scheduling issue. It was just, the details. Gerard, in any way, do you still have that hope of The Rock returning to the ring? Or has the opportunity passed now that there's no guarantee of it being in Hollywood, because it just felt like the stars are aligned in terms of the story, Roman's run at the moment, it being in Hollywood, all of that. Like, what's your thoughts?
Do I look forward to this happening in April? Absolutely. not. Like here's the thing. This is one of those moments where timing is everything.
Yeah.
WrestleMania 39 in Hollywood was the absolute right time. You know, the story was right. The story was no more hotter than it was by the time we got to WrestleMania, because a lot of things have happened since then that makes The Rock showing up at WrestleMania unnecessary and even unwanted. For instance, we haven't really been talking about the bloodline much because shortly after WrestleMania, about a month or two, it cooled off tremendously to the point where Survivor Series was massively hot with little to no presence or mention of the bloodline at all. Roman wasn't even present. Solo wasn't present. The Wise Man wasn't present, right? All of the things, they were not present. So I think at this point, it's unnecessary. You now have a lot of stars right now who can carry WrestleMania as is. You've got Cody potentially finishing his story, the return of CM Punk. Like, there's a lot of things that are going on potentially where they're not going to have a problem filling up things in Philly for 2 nights. They're not going to have a problem trying to figure out, what should happen? Do we need The Rock or not? I don't even know if the bloodline is going to be a factor come WrestleMania. So at this point, we missed an opportunity. It's like Sting and The Undertaker. There was an opportunity. We missed the window. It won't come again. And so I think at this point, it's not going to happen.
It's just not going to happen.
We don't even want it, like, for real.
Yeah, like the anticipation, the excitement, and all the rest of it. As I said, the stars were aligned, with it being in Hollywood and all the rest of it. There's still a little bit of an argument with it being in Philly, brotherly love, and all the rest of it. Obviously, their family. There could still be something. It's not impossible. WrestleMania 40 is a milestone, obviously, with it being 40. So there's a possibility, but it just doesn't feel the same. It's almost like I've said those two things in order to find a reason.
Right.
Not those reasons being, okay, I want it to happen because of it. It's almost like I'm just trying to find a reason as to why I still want it.
Listen, Mex got a ticket to come to the U.S. expecting to see The Rock. Like, that's the thing. People came looking to see him, and he didn't show. So I don't, we're in a different environment. If Mex gets a ticket to Mania, it's not because of the potential of seeing The Rock at this point. And so that tells you all you need to know. Very, very, very true. Very true.
October was a bumper month in terms of title wins for Black wrestlers. We saw Trick Williams win the NXT Championship for all of 3 days, was it? Something like that. Bear with me.
North American Championship. Yep.
We saw Ricky Starks finally win a legitimate AEW Championship by winning the AEW Tag Team Championship alongside Big Bill, still currently champions. Shug D ended a 1,338-day reign of Trish Adora to become the new Pan-African World Diaspora Wrestling Champion. And the other thing that happened that is definitely something for the future is the signing of Leon Slater to Impact Wrestling. Mex, you've talked about this before. Just give me again, just your thoughts and feelings on how much potential and the statement this makes for Impact to sign the young 19-year-old star from the UK.
It's a fantastic signing, and I can not stop singing Leon Slater's praises since I saw him for the first time live last year. Like, it's almost like he's a model professional and he's 19 years old. Like, he's like a very experienced head in the kind of interactions I've had with him. Very wise head, like just well-mannered, great behavior. He's not here for the nonsense, the drama. He's here to wrestle. He's here to be the best. So much so that obviously we saw, like you said, he's been signed by Impact, and obviously Impact is going to become TNA as of the new year. And, for a lot of, the younger generation that would have grown up on that, like 07, 08 TNA, like it's a dream come true that this brand is even kind of coming back, so they can now be a part of it. he won the British Cruiserweight Championship over the weekend. He beat Conor Mills for it at Rev Pro Uprising. So it still shows a trajectory he's on. And Impact have gotten an absolute coup. Like, for them to get in there as early as they have, signed him, yeah, it's really gonna pay off. And they've got someone that, you know, he'll go through the ranks and, you know, win the X Division titles and all of that kind of stuff. But it'll be within no time he'll be up there, you know, chasing the top titles over there. But yeah, he's a star, man.
It's one of those signings for me that just makes sense. As great as he is, as brilliant as he is, as young as he is, we've seen the likes of WWE sign. I forget his name. The two guys that they signed that wrestled at DPW. The two young.
Jay Malachi and
Jay Malachi.
Lucky Ali.
Yeah, Jay Malachi also being 19 years old, so it's not like you know WWE are not looking for these young stars. But for me, there was just something about Leon Slater that just makes a lot more sense for him to go to an Impact than it would be to go to an AEW or a WWE. It just feels as though it's the right move. It makes sense. I believe they'll develop him a lot better because their focus is the style of wrestling that he brings to the table as well. And I'm heavily excited to see matches like Leon Slater versus Trey Miguel. Jeez. Wow. Leon Slater versus Mike Bailey, Jonathan Gresham, even Crazy Steve. Like, come on. It's like that X Division just gives us so much, you know, just so many dream matches. And when I say dream matches, I don't necessarily mean the dream matches of a Carter versus Daniel Bryan. I'm just talking like these matches that they put together and you're just like, yeah, that makes sense. It's like the first time when you saw Ace Austin versus Chris Bay or Chris Bay versus Trey Miguel. It's like that kind of thing. You're just like, this is the future. We're seeing the future now. So the Leon Slater signing is absolutely perfect. We're moving into the latter part of the year and getting towards the end of our bumper edition of the show. November, we talked about Swerve, but Bex, just give me, we saw Swerve take on Hangman in this Texas Death Match. We've talked about, how important his match at All In was. But since this match against Hangman, the conversation when it comes to Swerve has completely changed. We've seen fans say that he should be not just the first black AEW champion. Well, fans ain't really been saying that in the majority. But at the same time, fans are saying he should be the next champion in AEW. To think that a guy, other guys like your Claudio Castagnoli, Daniel Bryan, Samoa Joe, Jay White, Kenny Omega, all these other names that are in AEW, but yet people are clamoring and asking and expecting Swerve to be the next AEW champion. Just tell me why this match made that change.
I mean, we've spoken about it that, he's had these matches before, Lucha Underground match with AR Fox, and, we know this is in his repertoire, but I guess this is the biggest stage that it's happened on.
Right,
and
most definitely.
The story was at a fever pitch. Like, the heat was so much going into this. And like we said as well, we'd literally seen this match, not obviously the stipulation, but this match between these two competitors happened a month beforehand. But the story was so good, they ran it back the next month. And it's a somewhat of a coming out party. Right, granted, it's not maybe the match you might show someone that, hey, I watch wrestling. Do you want to get into wrestling? Watch this death match. It may not be that kind of match, but it's definitely for us within wrestling, fandom, media, whatever you want to call this thing we do. Like, wow, like this guy went to another level, or he is at another level now. So, like you said, the conversation moved from, right, Swerve has to be the next black or the first black AEW champion to he needs to beat the current AEW champion because of obviously maybe misbooking over there as well. But he's ready at this point. You can see he's ready. He's primed. The iron is hot. let's strike sort of thing. So it's been a phenomenal last 6 months for Swerve, and now he's obviously in the Continental Classic doing really well. Had a bit of a bump last week against John Moxley, but we'll see if he can still find a way through in tomorrow night show. So yeah,
most definitely. Gerard, just how important is it for Swerve being a very different type of black wrestler? Because over the last few years, when we've seen a few black wrestlers kind of come to prominence, the likes of a Big E, Lashley, Keith Lee, even down to even a Jonathan Gresham, who was talked about quite a lot over the last year or two. They're either big men or they're wrestlers. Swerve has now shown that, over the years, and obviously with this match as well, that he's definitely much more of a, can adapt to this hardcore style as well as him being very technical. How important is it for Swerve to stand out in that way?
I think it's wildly important. One of the big questions I think that Swerve ended up having to answer post WWE run is, okay, could he find success being him? Not being what other people are trying to package him as, but by being himself. And so he's shown that indeed he absolutely can. When you start thinking about, the fact that Swerve While I Drive has gone viral, and it's helped to make, stars not just out of him, but out of Nana and all the people, and the dance has gone viral and all the things, coupled with him being an incredible wrestler. Like, this isn't just hype. He is unique in his style. He is unique in his presentation. He doesn't fit the typical black wrestler persona, whatever that might be. And so it's really exciting to see him not having to be super polished. He gets to wear fronts. He gets to, do all of the things. And even in AEW, when he kind of struggled to find his way, he can finally be him, and he is enough. And so I think this was incredible to be able to handle and operate with Sting and Darby Allin and now Hangman Page, and do it with Mox and all of these people, Jay White, all of the things. It's incredible. It's clearly his time. And we talked earlier about timing. It's important that they strike while the iron is hot. Do not miss this moment and try to wait until All In next year to do this. Wouldn't be a smart move at all. This needs to happen sooner than later, him becoming champion.
Speaking about striking when the iron is hot, it moves us perfectly into our final month of December. We've spoken about this guy, but let's speak about him a little bit more. It's Trick Williams, who won the Iron Survivor match just last week to become the #1 contender for the NXT Championship. The match, we talked about it last week. It was phenomenal. He's come from, having no falls at all in the match. A 25-minute match involving 5 other guys. All of them had either on 3 or 2 falls. He had absolutely nothing at all. Within the last 5 minutes of that match, probably less than the 5 minutes of that match, he ends up winning the match, getting pinfalls over everyone else in the match. How important, Mex, do you think these next few weeks are going to be, and how excited are you for Trick in 2024?
Yeah, I'm very excited. He's someone that we were just enjoying as, almost the side act to everything Melo was doing, and through especially this new regime in NXT, and I've over the last week since NXT Deadline, really, I've spoken highly that NXT have now got it right. NXT is doing what NXT was always designed to do. We lost our way. We were doing other stuff, and getting us other fans excited about bringing the indies to WWE. But this is what NXT was always meant to do, and now it's doing it. It's turned someone that we had frequently seen as a security guard on shows and in extra places to a second act next to Carmelo Hayes. And now he's developing into his own man, developing very quickly into his own man. The fans are more than behind him. Like, it's electric every time he steps out there, and that performance at NXT Deadline was just let alone just to get the timing of to pull that stunt.
Crazy.
Seconds left, like They've done an incredible job, and this story he's telling right now with Carmelo Hayes is it's somewhat akin, and obviously Shawn Michaels booking it to when Triple H attacked Shawn Michaels back in the day, and oh, who did it sort of thing. Like whether it's gonna be revealed as Carmelo Hayes or whomsoever, like they're telling it so well, setting up Trick very very well. For sure, I would think becomes NXT champion next year in 2024. And away from Melo, because like I say, I assume Melo probably goes up to the main roster. We'll really see, how he fares on his own, like really, really on his own. But right now he's doing everything correct, taking all the right steps, and they have got a star on their hands if they continue to mold it correctly.
Most definitely. As you said, NXT is doing what they need to do in terms of kind of creating the new stars, creating the future. We saw on Raw two ladies who have, come from NXT and were had all this potential and now kind of realized their potential, or one step more closer to realizing that potential, is Kaden Carter and Katana Chance. Of course, Kaden Carter, both of them come through NXT and are now the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, which is phenomenal to see. I didn't expect it. I knew they had a chance. I knew it was going to happen at some point, but if it happened yesterday, I don't think I expected that at all. But to talk about our last thing, we've talked about this whole year, and we've said it. We've mentioned this woman so many times already. But for me, I believe 2023 was definitely the year of Athena. On December 14th or 13th, she became she'd hit the milestone of a year as the ROH Women's Champion. You may repeat yourself, Gerard, but just how phenomenal, significant, and important has 2023 been for Athena these last 12 months?
Yeah, it's been incredible. We talked about Trinity going to Impact to become the women's wrestler we always believed she could be, but never got the opportunity to. That was 2023 for Athena. Her time in NXT as Ember Moon, the first run I thought was phenomenal. When she went to the main roster, it was never quite connecting. When she went back to NXT, it was never quite connecting. When she signed with AEW, we thought, wow, this could be cool. That very brief match she had with Jade, for the TBS championship, we thought that program was going to amount to something significant, and it didn't. When Ring of Honor finally hit the reboot button and she made her way to Ring of Honor and won that women's title back at Final Battle 2022, then Ring of Honor finally ends up with a weekly show that we've been clamoring for. She becomes the focal point. I don't think anybody planned for that. I think they thought, hey, we're going to do all the things that we do. But this is one of those times where you get a moment, you take the moment, and you make the most of it. That's what Athena has done. And for all of the issues that some might have when it comes to how Ring of Honor has been presented, Ring of Honor being behind the paywall, all of the things, and even the talk of how AEW's women's division, doesn't have enough room or time for stories. Ring of Honor is the complete antithesis of that. Their women's division is deep. They are showcased on a regular basis every single week. And who's been leading that charge? Athena. Whether it's brand new superstars or experienced superstars, she's had every kind of match you can imagine. She has earned the right to be in the main event of a Ring of Honor pay-per-view. And she's done it not once, but twice. And we should be clear, they only do 3 pay-per-views a year. So she is that one. She is the one. What a year she's had. Top 10, in the PWI, 250. All of it is well deserved. And you think about it, she's become more important than right now any woman on the AEW women's roster. She is that. And so to see her outlast Billy Starks, to have the story that they've had for the last 6 months, to tell that story so expertly, she has earned every flower that she gets and then some. this year. Congratulations, Athena. It has indeed been your year of honor.
Most definitely. And I think for me, in ending and kind of like bringing a synopsis to 2023, and I think, Gerard, you said it already, that 2023 definitely has been the year of the Black female. You know, I remember like kind of just going through posts, even posting throughout the year, and I felt like I was doing someone a disservice. I'm just posting about the ladies, and I'm like, is someone gonna think I just love the ladies in this game? Because you know what I mean? I'm just like, they were just the ones with the headlines. At times I felt I was running you know, women's wrestle talk page, because I'm just like, I'm just posting ladies here. But you know, we as we've said, you know, we go through the year again. We talk about the start of the year with Mercedes, Athena kind of making her way through, Trinity making that massive signing and making that massive change, significant change to Impact. Jade signing with WWE and how massive that is. And we come to the end of the year and we're still talking about 2023 being Athena's year. And even Bianca's records as well, you know, I mean, around summertime as well. So it's crazy, you know. Georgie said, you know, the 5 ladies that have just stood out all year, for very different reasons in their own right as well, which makes a massive difference to it all as well. All in separate companies.
Yes.
Until Jade signed with WWE, but at the same time, you know, all within separate companies, making their names. And I think that for me is the biggest take away from 2023. Yes, we talked about, you know, the rise of Trick, the rise of Swerve, the year that Carmelo's had, the great stuff Wesley has done as well. But you know, with it being Black women, you know, 2 spaces where, you know, you're just pushed to the back, Black and female, but yet these ladies have been right at the forefront throughout the whole year. And that for me is the biggest part of 2023. I hope it continues into 2024. But I'm very, very excited to see the likes of what happens with Swerve, with Trick, even with Leon Slater in Impact, and a few of the faces and names. We talked about Lash Legend last week as well. Her appearance in the Iron Survivor match, what could happen with her. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting 2024. But I'm going to try my best to make sure that the first 3 months don't determine what I'm expecting for the rest of the year, because it's not going to happen, as we've seen this year. Guys, any final thoughts on 2023 before we get out of here?
It's been a good year. Like we've said, we've established, like, you know, the likes of Swerve is definitely coming for something big. I think, you know, Ricky Starks, you could probably see from about the middle of the year that, you know, it's not going to work out in AEW, and it's okay. I expect to probably see him turn up in WWE at some point next year, maybe. Like you said, for the women in general, no matter where they've been formidable. You know, I think we even mentioned, you know, Trisha Dora kind of enrolling into the New Japan Academy, as they now call it. So, you know, she's definitely done something to get into there, because we know how prestigious that is. And then, you know, we're going to expect big things from her very, very soon. So, yeah, just in general, man, at all kind of levels, at the different echelons of this game, like, we're making an impact, we're coming in, we're knocking down these doors, knocking down the barriers, making records. So yeah, it's very impressive, and long may it continue.
For sure. Gerard?
Yeah, you know, I echo everything that Mech said. In addition, you know, shout out to Black media in the pro wrestling space, like what we're doing here, Women's Wrestling Talk, and several other entities that are really doing a great job. Shout out to these promotions as well on the indie scene that are really highlighting Black talent, from All Caribbean Wrestling, who is really helping to take things around the world, to the debut of Ashe with Darius Lockhart and the amazing talent that's there. There are so many great spaces for the African-American wrestler to apply their talent. The wrestling landscape looks so different than it did 10 years ago. You know, I mean, we would have only dreamt to have had a year like this year, where there were 5 separate females in 5 different brands running things, you know, like that's incredible. on top of all of the talent that we have mentioned throughout this show, and the rise of people in other promotions outside of WWE as well as inside of WWE. What a year it's been. Long may it continue. And as fans, my hope and prayer is that we'll continue to support the wrestling that we say we love. These superstars, get their merch, talk about them on the socials, all of the things. You know, we didn't even get to mention Brian Keith and the amazing weekend he had this weekend, right? Like that's a great bit of momentum to go into 2024. And, you know, if fans aren't making noise about Brian Keith, this whole Brian Keith thing doesn't happen this weekend. So I think, again, it speaks to our power as fans and as supporters that we should continue to support these promotions and these wrestlers and make 2024 another significant year.
Most definitely, man. I think it's very important to kind of keep our eyes on this indie scene as well. You know, you mentioned the likes of Brian Keith. We didn't even talk about Alex Kane becoming MLW heavyweight champion. Willow winning the New Japan Strong Women's Championship. You know, we quickly mentioned Jay Malachi and Lucky Ali being signed to WWE, and so many other things that are kind of in the pipeline and happening in and around, you know, not just the big promotions, but the smaller ones as well. To definitely keep our eyes on those places, because we want these people to come up to the WWEs and the AEWs and even the Impacts as well. So let's keep talking about them. Guys, this has been WrstlXtra. You are watching on the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See us every single Tuesday at the same time, live, or to watch us just whenever you want, when you find a bit of time. Today, you had to find about 1 hour and 45 minutes. It's never usually that long. But we had to do it. It's the bumper show. You will always also see this guy, Mex, put out all his reactions to WWE, AEW, and everything else in between. Don't forget you can also find Mex on the Wrestling's channel with the Mandem. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see all of their shows on a weekly basis as well. Very great interviews and discussions between the Mandem. You can find this guy, Gerard Bonner, the omnipresent man that is on here, WWT Live, The Nightmare Factory, our Shay, All Caribbean Wrestling, Southern Honor Wrestling, IWE. He's everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. And he's his own show, The Faction Show. I forgot about that one. Yes, You can also find him on all things on the socials at Bonafide. You can find me, A Dazzle, on Instagram on Black Wrestling Alliance, and on X, BWA Dazzle. This has been our time. It is over. Thank you for joining us this year, and we will actually see you in the new year. Guys, this has been our time. See you later.
See you later, guys.